Sailors who have spent nights out on the water, what's the sketchiest encounter you've had out there in the dark? The actual dark. It is pitch black out in the middle of the ocean. That can be quite unnerving. On the upside, on cloudless nights, the night sky is breathtaking. When you're in the middle of the ocean and realize that if you got dumped in the water, it is likely that no one would even notice you missing for a while, and it's a big freaking ocean to go looking in for one guy. And what gets me, since I'm mountains and mountains only kinda gal, is that with SARS on land we can estimate fairly well where a person is going and reasonably where they will take shelter. We are humans, after all. And a little bit of instinct does take over. In the ocean there's none of that. You are in plain, indistinct water until you are dead. To add to that, double quote, until you are dead, will not be long. It is a totally inhospitable environment to human beings. Like a desert. But worse. You are surrounded by water but cannot drink it. You have absolutely no cover or protection from the elements, or any animals that may be nearby. You have no way to catch or prepare sustenance. And you cannot relax to sleep. If you stop swimming or consciously trying to maintain your float, you will drown. 50 odd miles offshore on a sailboat. Pitch black. Suddenly we hear a loud crack, and the boat shifts an inch to port. Then silence for 20 minutes, followed by another loud thump, and boat shudder. Made our way quickly back to the coast. In dry dock there was a 2-foot diameter dent in the hull. I'm guessing a sleeping whale. Nah, highly doubt it. Sharks will bite the boat when you get them worked up feeding next to it. Almost exclusively happens to fishermen or people enticing the sharks. No shark would just swim straight into a cruising sailboat and ram it as a form attack. OP likely hit either a patch of floating debris or a whale. They can't hear the sailboats coming, so it's easy to hit whales. But in some places floating debris are really common offshore as well. Not really an encounter, but we had a man overboard at 2 AM. 8 days into a 21-day sail from the Galapagos to Polynesia. Really heavy weather and couldn't snuff out parasail, and someone came forward without being clipped on and got knocked overboard. Took us about 25 minutes to get them back on board and 3 hours to sort out the lines, etc. In terms of encounters, huge groups of luminous jellyfish are pretty weird to see at night. Curious whales, dolphins are really cool. Probably the sketchiest is coming close to container ships during the night. Those things don't change course unless it's essential. I heard what I'm assuming is a whale breaching while it was pitch dark. It'd be cool if I could see it. But at night when I have no idea what's out there, it was kind of spooky. Sounded like a lot of water shifting around and big splashes in the dark. I don't see what else it could have been. This brought back a memory of similar experience I had. Definitely spooky. Not a sailor, but I was night surfing on an overcast evening where the moonlight would fade in and out, so you would go from periods of pretty good visibility to stretches of darkness when the cloud cover moved. There was a lull in between sets, so the sea was relatively calm and quiet when, out of nowhere, there was a huge splash and the noise of displaced water. If the gods had thrown a boulder into the sea, it's what I imagine it would sound like. I was not expecting anything like that, and I completely lost my cool for a split second. Of course the wave started back up, then obscuring any chance I had to hear anything further. Telling myself to remain calm and slowly paddle back to shore took every bit of effort I had. I'm sure any animal within a mile could hear my heart pounding. Made it in without incident and sat on the beach for a while listening and looking. There was no other sounds or sight of whatever it could have been. Later I tried to research it, and my best guess is that it was a right whale breaching, as they migrate through our area during that time of year, though they are rare, so I will never know for sure. Thanks for sharing your story. It makes me feel a little better about my own experience. Close bracket. Out at sea at night, no moon. Pitch black. I'm talking shoot in the shitty with a shipmate and out of nowhere whoop. The loudest slap I have ever heard. My buddy literally screams. WTF. A flying fish. Right in the face. That was 40 years ago. I'm still laughing. Full disclosure. This is not directly sailing related. But I am a sailor and have a creepy nighttime ocean experience to share. while guiding a night dive once. We had a massive female 7-gill shark follow us for the whole dive, just occasionally coming into our visibility before darting off. She was probably just curious of our lights or maybe using them to hunt, but it was just really unnerving to know she was around but unable to see her. That being said, I love sharks, and she did us no harm. They're usually super chill and not to be feared, but you can't help but respect any predator bigger than you are who while it follows you around in the dark. 2 situations. 1. I was on a tanker somewhere in the middle of Indian Ocean. Graveyard watch. Fairly good weather. Good visibility. I notice a lighthouse light ahead of me. Looks far but it is very distinct. Flashes rhythmically. Quite bright. I check the radar. Nothing. I check the chart, nothing for at least 400 miles. I continue to observe until it just stops abruptly. Freaked me out a bit. 2. Waters near Philippines. Quiet watch. Few fishing boats in the area. Suddenly I notice a very faint light dead ahead of me. Looks very far. Nothing on radar. Can barely see it. I thought I have some time until it shows up on radar, but something was telling me to alter course to starboard. So I did, and 1 minute after the alteration I was passing a tiny fishing boat by about 200 meters with one guy with a STTY torch on board. If I didn't act on my instinct I would have ran him over. I was on board the USS Reuben James in 2012. I was standing watch in combat and decided to take a smoke break on the starboard side windbreak at 3 AM. It was cloudy, so almost pitch black. I had gone down at this time on many occasions, and there are usually 1 or 2 other people up that late going out for a smoke break. When I got out there I could see nothing but the cherry of someone else's cig. I face outward and leaned on the brake and lit my Camel Gold and asked how his night was going. Having no idea who I was speaking to, but figuring I would find out when I heard his voice description of his night. I got no response. I turned around to see if he had heard me, and with my eyes adjusted I would have been able to make him out leaning against the steel wall. As I turned around, the moon cracked out from the clouds and slightly illuminated the small confined area I was in and the only 2 directions anyone could have walked away. There was no one there. I was alone. I had seen the cigarette and the exhale of smoke from someone on that windbreak, but no one was there, and no one could have left the smoke deck without my hearing or seeing them. I don't believe in ghosts or the afterlife or any of that nonsense, but needless to say I didn't stick around outside for long. Coming through a part of the Mediterranean with a lot of oil platforms. At night. I was Con. One of the other ensigns was Judd. And our navigator was Odd. Nav ducked into the chart room. So it was just me and the Judd when we saw what looked like another oil platform on the horizon. Only it wasn't showing up on either of our radars. It wasn't on the chart. And the laser rangefinder wasn't working. So the 2 of us are watching this thing get closer and closer. And we were about to call the captain up to the bridge. Judd had just picked up the phone when Nav walks back into the pilot house. Takes one look at the 2 of us freaking out and goes, "You guys know that's the moon, right? The quartermaster's left that one out of the deck log." Sailing just a couple miles off the Norwegian coast. In an old 14 feet dinghy all by my lonesome. Well, sailing is the wrong word. I was drifting in near 0 wind. Barely making a knot of headway. That's why I was still out there. I had planned to spend the night on a small island, but getting there took forever and it got pitch dark. No matter. I was safe enough, and it was kind of nice to have the nighttime ocean all to myself. Not a ship in sight anywhere. I had oars and could have rowed to my destination in an hour or so, but didn't feel like there was any need to hurry. Had left the outboard motor ashore because of hunting laws against shooting from a motorized vessel. And I was going after migrating geese. At my position it was calm and quiet. But all around the horizon I saw flashes of lightning so far off that I heard no thunder. As I relaxed and enjoyed the quiet spectacle of distant lightning, all of a sudden I heard someone or something draw a labored breath right next to me. It was unmistakably the sound of breathing. Like from a half-strangled person taking a deep breath of much needed air. Not gonna lie. I briefly panicked before I realized it had to be some marine mammal surfacing for air close to my boat. guessing it was a harbor porpoise as they are common here. But I never saw it in the darkness. Heard it again a few times. Sounded like it moved further away and there may have been more than one based on the frequency. Of course sound carries far at night. But it really did sound like that initial breath was right behind me. Close enough to touch. Shortly after the breathing sounds disappeared, the wind picked up out of nowhere and I had to scramble to adjust rigging. Made it to the correct island and made landfall about 20 minutes later. Having gone from idly drifting on the current to skipping over the waves in a few heartbeats. I guess that distant storm dropped by to say hello. Underway. Early March in a snowstorm. East of Cape Cod. Moderate season ship is rocking pretty good. We lose power and go beam to the seas. Except for emergency lighting. Which was not much because our battle lanterns were garbage. And personal mini-mag lights. It's dark as hell at times. Worst part? You could hear the creaks and groans of the ship. It was intensified when the ship would take longer than normal to right itself. It made the ship seem much older than it was. At times like those, I would say to myself, double quote, should have went to college. Dipshitty. Scariest thing that ever happens to me was in port. I was a sailor on the USS Carr, stationed in Norfolk. There was a shipmate who had gotten himself in trouble and was being kicked out of the Navy. He was not allowed to leave the ship. I saw him on Friday carrying weights out of the ship's gym. Odd, but I didn't pay much mind. I had to come in for duty the next day and he had vanished overnight. We searched the entire ship from top to bottom 3 times over. No sign of him. We found out later he tied the weight from the gym to his feet and jumped overboard the night before. He washed up 3 weeks later when his corpse detached from the weight and floated to the surface. While I was on 31st Mu. One night at like 0100. I walked down the starboard outside gangway that runs from the marine maintenance shops to the gym on the starboard side. It's about 150 feet long. And since we were in blackout conditions, it was pitch black outside. About 2/3 the way down. There was this quiz, part of the defense system, that sticks out off the gangway so the hand rope cuts out through there. As soon as I let go of the rope to grab the wall on the opposite side, the ship, which was in otherwise calm, flat water, decided to suddenly drop 10 feet as if it ran across another ship's wake. As I struggled to hold on, I swear I could feel something pulling me. Almost as the ship suddenly rocked 45 degrees and I was getting shaken off like water on a dog. Once it recovered, and I got my footing, it was back to flat, calm water. I blindly scrambled as fast as I could to the end. Got inside and no one knew what bump I was talking about. Mind you, this is a several 100-ton warship and home to thousands. If there was chop, we'd know. Nevertheless, I took the interior passages after that. Edit. Apparently it's SIS, not quiz. But I'm going to leave it for comment continuity. Too many acronyms. Not a night encounter but still sketchy. October 1986. Early morning, 0730. Steaming on the rum line from the Cape Cod Canal to MT. Desert Rock. Skirting Matinicus. It was dungeon thicker fog. Visibility about 200 yards. No radar, so we were steaming along at 5 knots. All of a sudden my depth sounder showed a shoal below is at 140 feet. We were in 600 plus foot depth water according to the charts. I'm in a panic in the wheelhouse trying to figure out how we could be so far off course to be in 140 water. This was before GPS. We were getting sat-nav fixes every 30 minutes. About 2 minutes later, the sounds of hovering helicopters was on both sides of us. Vietnam Vet. Marine Corps. Air Wing. I know what a chopper at low altitude sound like. Close bracket. After a few minutes the choppers lifted and went forward of us. My depth sounder had returned to 600 plus depth. I am standing in the wheelhouse scratching my head, trying to figure out what the hell was going on when the fog lifted. Ahead of us was a carrier battle group. Big carrier. Lots of auxiliary ships. Choppers everywhere. Sonobawais in the water all around us. We were in the middle of a carrier battle group doing exercises and an attack sub had just used us as a decoy to try to attack. My wife and I were on the boat in the middle of the ocean at night. We were fishing for swordfish. Common to do in South Florida. We are 30 miles from land. In the middle of the Gulf Stream. Fishing was horrible, so we stopped to head in. Off in the distance I see a massive underwater light coming towards us. Freaked me out. The light chased us for a few seconds and went deep into the water. I'll never forget that night. It was too fast to be a submarine. And we were too far from land for it to be anything but a UFO. I have chills thinking about what the hell it was. This happened in 1986. My wife and I were 2 days out of the Azores headed to Newport. RI. We were in our 60 feet Dutch built wooden trawler bringing it to the USA. It was green. It was a gorgeous night. 1 full moon. Gazillions of stars. Big pod of dolphins playing in our bow wake. Phosphorescences all around us. Flying fish bouncing off the cabin. Our wake was visible for at least a mile behind us. Glowing in the night. That night I had the middle watch. About 0330 I decided that since there were no running lights on the horizon and we were 200 miles south of the shipping lanes that it would be okay to turn our running lights off so I could really enjoy the spectacular light show Mother Nature was providing. Even woke the wife up early so she could see the light show outside. About 5 minutes later an American voice booms over the radio. Double quote. Will the green fishing boat please turn your lights back on? They didn't answer my question asking who they were. There were no boats visible anywhere. No wakes. No glow. To this day I don't know who made the broadcast. When the sun came up there were no ships in sight. 300 plus miles from the nearest piece of dirt. Someone was watching us. Big Brother is everywhere. So I'm a US Navy guy. We were somewhere in the Pacific and it was warm, so I am assuming the Indian Ocean. This was circa 2004. I worked nights and it's supersizing how quiet an aircraft carrier can be at night. And X-200B. On this night there were no flight operations and about 80% of the crew is asleep. No one even thinking about flying around. The sea wasn't too rough that day. However, I do remember the sound of the random thuds of slightly larger waves. So, at about 1 AM we decide to cut through the hangar bay to lunch. There were 2 guys in front of us. I could see them moving in back and forth in a S-type pattern, meaning the ship was rolling gently port to starboard, left to right. As the 2 guys in front of me snaked toward the open aircraft elevator door, side door about 50x40 ft. I could see the top of a wave coming right at us. That wave had just decided to join us in the hangar bay. The bottom of the wave hit with that vibrating thud. The top of the wave sheared off and rolled right into the hangar bay, knocking over the 2 guys, and as it turned from a wave into a puddle, the wave decided to return to the ocean, sucking the 2 guys out toward the dark ocean. And X-200B. Fortunately one sailor stopped short and the other managed to grab onto the post and wire that loosely guard the elevator door opening. That was 100% sketch. Off the coast of Johannesburg on a Westmac. 3 of us decide to spend the night to get an even earlier start on the lobsters. Quiet night. Low winds. The Milky Way, a broad band of light across the sky. Around 2 we all awake at the same time because we hear something really long slowly scrp along under the hull. Our beds were about a foot above from whatever it was. We looked at each other in silence. None of us wanted to be a hero and go up to see if there was anything to see. You wouldn't have either, bud? Not really a nighttime thing. But the creepiest thing for me is when you're out there in the ocean, in the water, and you look down. There's nothing below you. Maybe 4 miles. Just a black abyss. And then your brain starts to play with you. You start to see things in the abyss, and I'm not talking mermaids or friendly seals. You start to see large monsters down there. Sharks as big as your boat. Man-eating whales. Whatever. Of course you know none of it is real. But When I was in the Coast Guard we thought we found someone smuggling Cubans, so we launched our small boat and got up all nice and close. Small boat and ship both turned on all the lights and sirens at the same time, and even the spotlight. It was like 3 million candle power or something crazy. Turned out to be some state representative out fishing with kids. Oops. They were cool, understandable. While fishing in Alaska, after a late opening we didn't have enough time to deliver our catch before the tide changed and had to let the boat go dry on the bottom until the next tide brought back enough water so we could get to the offload. We went to bed around 2 AM and woke up to the boat rustling about at about 3:30 am. The tide wasn't due back that soon, so we knew it wasn't the water. We slowly crawled up and looked out the back door to find a full-grown bear on the back deck. The bear had already thrown a 40-50 lb deck plate off the boat onto the sand and was eating out of one of our fish holes. With the boat only being 32 feet, you can imagine the bear took up about 1/2, 3/4 of the entire fish deck. Luckily we were safe in the steel boat, but nevertheless it was a very close encounter. A different season, during a very low tide our captain ran straight into the top of a reef and set the boat sideways and sinking. We had to escape overboard and be rescued by the Coast Guard. Luckily we saved the boat. Got hauled out and we're back finishing the same day. As fun as Alaskan fishing is, there are plenty of moments like this every season. I was on a friend's boat in the San Francisco Bay a good number of years ago. It was well past dark and I was enjoying the ocean breeze leaning over the gunwale. All of a sudden something black exploded out of the water while cutting loose this slobbery snarling blug. All I saw was a flash of crazy sharp fangs silhouetted by a black greasy looking mass before it crashed back into the water. After everybody came running to see why I was screaming and shitting my pants, it was explained to me that I probably saw a sea lion jump out of the water and surprise at the boat passing so close to it. US Navy. Petty officer in charge of low visibility watch. Watch that is called when you are in the middle of the ocean and there is so much fog you can't far from the ship. Watches are stationed in different places on a ship to listen, watch and record any activity. It is to make sure no one sneaks up or we don't run into another ship or boat. Anyway, I had just made my rounds and making sure everyone was in place and awake because it was middle of the night and pitch black. I was just about to check in with Bridge Watch and I get a call over the radio from 2 different watch stations. They reported movement in the water but was unable to see what it was. It sounded like something cutting through the water very fast. I called for the watch officer and I was already at the bridge, so reported it and went to investigate one station while the officer went and checked the other. With us posting at each. We both heard it, but could not see anything. The fog was so dense you couldn't see the water line. 2 different stations hearing the same thing. LHA is not a small ship. We were all tense. We were thinking the worst. Just then a break in the fog reveals that there are huge fish swimming around us feeding on the algae. The algae was luminescent as the fish would swim through. It looked like hundreds of shooting stars in the water. It was beautiful. Even these words can't describe the beauty. So my report read that it was a huge school of fish. The only people to witness it was the people on the watch. We had a collision with another vessel that had sunk due to running aground. It was towed out by the Coast Guard and left with a lit up buoy. When we hit it we were traveling at 14 knots. 1 meter of the sunken hull was above the water line and the light they detached had run out of battery. New moon plus midnight plus improperly disposed of sunken 50 meters motor yacht with no warning light equals big crash. Luckily there was no breach in our hull. A lot of damage though, and we did need to be towed back to Italy from Greece. That summer we also had an engine room fire underway the morning of a charter, and one of the portholes in the master cabin broke and flooded the cabin a day before a different charter. Safe to say that was not a fun boat to work on.